Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are broadcast or wherever you're picking this up from. This is the Downfield Read podcast. I am, as always, Jeff D, your football aficionado. Thanks for tuning in. Short notice here on a week 3 live stream coming at you at about 12:15 Central Time. You know what time it is. It is Tuesday. We've got all of week 3 games that have been played. And we are going to get into a breakdown. We're going to go into game by game, each game outside of Thursday. We covered that in a previous show, but we are going to get into the game by game of all of the Sunday games and the 2 Monday night games. One you could call a game, the other one you could call a blowout. But we're going to go into every one of those, give you some play by play, give you some thoughts. If you've got questions along the way, please feel free to go ahead and comment. And I will say this as well. If you are not following me on X, on Facebook, on everything, I actually just created another link on LinkedIn for a different page for Downfield Read. Also, you could pick up my content on www.downfieldread.com. Go ahead, like, share. I want to say thank you to a bunch of Facebook fans out there. I think I increased by about 20% over this last weekend by all my new followers. So thank you so much. If you are tuning in from Facebook, I guess this is kind of your congratulatory or thank you very much podcast that you can tune into now. So we are slowly but surely getting our audience base up there. But without further ado, I tell you what, let's get into some football games of what happened over the weekend here. And we are going to start off with the noon games, obviously, on Sunday. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the Cleveland Browns at the New York Giants. And here are some quick, I guess, updates or takeaways from each game. Number one is, we had a lot of upsets that happened in week 2. And I want to say that there were probably a good 10 different upsets that had happened in week 2. Things have settled down a little bit, but we are going to start off with a handful of really upsets again for week 3. We've got the Giants at the Browns, and Watson looked good. Deshaun Watson looked good early, but only early. Daniel Jones, he looked pretty darn efficient. If you saw the game at all, Daniel Jones, you're thinking, I thought this guy was supposed to be bad. He's actually shown up last week. And whether that's because of his receivers, Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors, we'll get into them in a little bit. But Daniel Jones, he got the ball out really quick. Were all the throws great? No, they weren't. He got a lot of help, like I said, from Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors. If you looked at their yards after the catch, they made some great catches. Neighbors, again, showing why he maybe should have been picked as the number 1 wide receiver in the draft over Marvin Harrison Jr. But we'll get into Marvin Harrison Jr. He had another phenomenal week as well in his rookie season. And I'm watching this game and I'm thinking either the Giants D-line is really good or the Browns offensive line is just really bad. Either way, Deshaun Watson needs to make passing decisions a lot quicker and a lot better. It was sloppy again, even for coming into week 3. There were a lot of fumbles, a lot of sloppy tackling by the Giants and the Browns, both teams. And the game in general just kind of seemed like it was too fast for Deshaun Watson. I'm not sure what the problem is, and this happens, or at least it happened last year. The guy hasn't played a whole lot over the past few seasons, and there's always excuses about Deshaun Watson. The game seems really fast. Earlier in the season, it seemed like he could have cared less about being on the football field. He'd rather be anywhere else but playing football. He missed wide open players, defensive end Jordan Akins. I get that David Njoku is not in there, but he missed a wide open Jordan Akins multiple times in the fourth quarter, especially when there was a 3rd and 5 that they could have converted on. And then that 3rd and 5 turned into a 4th and 5. And it was literally 2 plays back to back where if he could have just dumped the ball out to him, they would have converted. As far as the Giants go, Devin Singletary probably has some upset fantasy owners out there by sliding down at the 1 yard line at the end of the game with about 2 minutes to go. Got a breakaway run. Fantasy owners, I'm sure, were cheering. but he slid down to preserve the win for the Giants. That is the call that you want to take. Giants get their first win this year, 1-2, progressively look a little bit better each week. That's not saying a whole lot considering how they started off in the season. But for the Browns now, it's their second loss of the season. It's the second loss in a row. It's the second loss at home. They are now 1-2. And if you're looking at Daniel Jones, he was 24 of 34. He threw for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a passer rating of 109.4. Again, I feel like he got a lot of help out with Neighbors. Neighbors had 8 receptions, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wandale had 7 receptions for 61. There were 3 fumbles on this Giants team, so they're still playing sloppy ball. 3 fumbles, 2 of them were lost, all different players, so it's not the same person that's, fumbling the ball all the time. The defense had 8 sacks, which was amazing, which is why I said before, either this Giants defensive line is being underrated or the offensive line for the Cleveland Browns is really being overrated. 8 sacks on Deshaun Watson, 5 tackles for a loss, 17 quarterback hits. And I don't think that there was another defense that had as many quarterback hits as the Giants. What does that mean? It means Deshaun Watson, like I said before, the game is too fast for him right now. He's not clicking. He's getting hit a lot. Offensive line, not protecting him. Not a good sign for the Cleveland Browns. Watson was 21 of 37. Only threw for 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, passer rating of 89.5. And Jerome Ford only had 10 carries, 37 yards. Obviously, that's 3.7 yards per carry. They couldn't get anything going on the running game. Amari Cooper finally showed up, 7 receptions, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns. Watson, 2 fumbles lost. And as far as the Browns defense, you would have expected these numbers from the Giants, not the Browns. 2 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, but they still had 9 quarterback hits on Daniel Jones. Overall, Giants win this game 21-15, and that's kind of what I predicted anyway. Now, for everyone out there, we're going to do a little take at the end of each one of these games. It's going to be, is it time to hit the panic button? Yeah, I know it's only week 3, but for some of these teams, it might be time to hit the panic button. For Cleveland, I don't think so yet, but I only had Cleveland really winning 8 games this year. They actually started off much better than I had anticipated with beating Dallas at home. I had them losing to Dallas, losing to Jacksonville, winning to the Giants, and being 1-2 at this point anyway. So I don't think this is a time to panic, especially if you saw the Cincinnati Bengals game last night. No time to panic yet in the AFC North for the Cleveland Browns and the Giants. Congratulations on a much-needed first win of the year. Going on to the second game here, we had the Eagles at the Saints, and I will call this one another upset as well. For as well as the Saints had been playing, they only put up 12 points in this game against the Eagles. Now, they had been putting up 40-plus points the first 2 weeks. So this is kind of an anomaly for the Saints to go in here. Both teams are now 2-1. Both teams are very good teams. The Saints just had too many 3rd and long. The Eagles did a lot of passing early, which I don't think the Saints actually anticipated for. Didn't lead to a whole lot of points. But when you think about the Eagles, you've got Saquon Barkley back there. You're missing A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert has been relatively unheard of in the first 2 weeks. But they went passing early. Hurts had an interception in the end zone. That hurt. And I got to say, that hurts. Hurts. And he's wildly overrated at this point in time. I don't think he's a guy that you can actually bank on to lead your franchise. He also lost a fumble. So both defenses, the D-lines, played very well in this game. And I mentioned it before, but Dallas Goedert, welcome back, Dallas Goedert. He had a hell of a game. And I think the Saints just probably forgot that Goddard was even part of the Philadelphia Eagles in general because he hadn't done anything over the last couple of weeks. Barkley wore down the Saints defense in the second half, and that's exactly why they brought him into Philadelphia so that they could prolong these games, get close wins, which they did 15-12. The Saints could not convert or finish a drive, and it seemed odd compared to what the first 2 weeks looked like. David Carr was 14-25, only 142 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I believe that was his first interception of the season so far. That was at the very end of the game during garbage time, trying to make the most out of something, trying to get his team a win but that did not happen, of course. Alvin Kamara, 26 carries, 87 yards. 0 touchdowns for him. He was a really big fantasy player the first couple of weeks. Everybody was banking on him to do some more. Also had 3 receptions for 40 yards. Didn't do a whole lot. But who did we see? We saw Chris Olave finally. He had his best game of the year, 6 receptions, 86 yards, and a touchdown. He caught everything. I think he literally got thrown to 6 times, and he caught all 6 passes. This guy just throw it up in the air for him. It's almost like a Randy Moss. Just go ahead and give it to him, and he'll get it. The defense for the Saints, they had 4 sacks. 2 by second-year man Brian Breesy, who was a great pickup, first-round pickup in 2023. 7 tackles for a loss, 8 quarterback hits. And Shaheed, where was he? He did absolutely nothing. No stat line for Rashid Shaheed. He had such a big part in this offense the first 2 weeks, and I think you can kind of point to that, and you can say, hey, you got to get the ball to him a little bit more. Yes, they focused on Olave. Olave had Rashid Shaheed numbers from the first 2 weeks, but you got to find out a way to get both of these guys involved in this offense at the same time. Conversion rate for New Orleans, they were 6 of 13 on third downs, not terrible. 0 for 1 on fourth down. When you're looking at Philly, like I said, Hurts, he was 29 of 38, not too bad, 311 yards. The stat line looks really good. I just don't think he played very well. 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, which, like I said, in the end zone, that takes points off the board for the Philadelphia Eagles. But Barkley really came through at the end. 17 carries, 147 yards, 8.6 yards per carry. Had 2 touchdowns, and Goddard, like I said, 10 receptions, 170 yards for him. Just a really amazing day for him. Devonta Smith, hopefully he comes back. He got hit at the end of that game. Not that the Eagles can afford to lose another wide receiver. Devonta Smith goes out with a concussion at the end, not before having 7 receptions, 79 yards. And this Philadelphia defense got only 1 sack on David Carr, 6 tackles for a loss, only 4 quarterback hits. So the defensive line really needs to pick it up. And you wonder where these big names are for the Philadelphia Eagles on that defensive front at this point in time. They held Kamara to 3.3 yards per carry, which was really good. And they put up all 15 points in the fourth quarter. So Philadelphia shows up at the end of the game and they snag one away from the New Orleans Saints. Didn't play very well for the first 3 quarters, but their defense kept them in the game well enough. This game was interesting, but kind of a snoozer until that point in time. Philly had a few more big plays out there. They converted 6 of 14 on third down, went for it 3 times on fourth down, only got 1 of them. But there's another upset for you. So the first 2 games that we talk about, Eagles at the Saints, I would have put actually the money on the Saints for that one, especially playing at home against an Eagles team that kind of fell apart in week 2. So moving on to week 3, and this one, not so much of an upset. It should have been a much better game. It was much better advertised than it was in actuality here. The 2-1 Texans that are now 2-1 versus they came into this game. Both teams were undefeated at 2-0. The Vikings leave with the win. It's another home win for them. And at what point in time do we start talking about the Minnesota Vikings being a legit contender here for the NFC North? That is a shocker to me. I didn't think that they were even going to have a chance, especially after losing J.J. McCarthy. But Sam Darnold is coming out to be the real deal here. Minnesota Vikings, and they're not beating easy teams. It's not like they went and beat the Tennessee Titans and the Carolina Panthers. No, they just beat the Texans, who a lot of people thought were the best team in the AFC, and they sure showed it in the first couple of weeks. Vikings beat San Francisco last week. Vikings beat the Texans this week. Not a bad start. Darnold to Jefferson was kind of the key for the day. And Jefferson is just too good of a wide receiver. He did have a couple of dropsies at the end of that game. But by that point in time, they were already up and it didn't really matter anyway. JJ will beat himself up for it on the sideline. He'll get pats on the back. He had a great day. Darnold had time is kind of the one takeaway that I'll give you. That offensive line was exceptionally solid for the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings D looked fast. They got to the ball carriers, no matter who it was. That was really what shut down this Texans offense really early. They were getting some plays. They were completing passes, but every time somebody got out, nobody broke away. It was always Nico with a catch. 2 yards after the catch. Stephon Diggs, a sliding catch, and he was down right away. So these guys really got to the ball very well. So kudos to their defense. The Vikings offense was able to eat up time and really shut down this game and bring it home, and it didn't take very long. Texans, once they got into Minnesota territory, they just couldn't do anything. They were good all the way up until about they got to the Vikings 40 or even 35-yard line. And then it was like they just kind of started out. They stalled out. Jalen Nailor was another great one for the Minnesota Vikings. I believe he's very underestimated. He had 3 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. Watch out for this guy in the red zone. Aaron Jones, I think we need to start talking about him being a top 10 running back. He looked fantastic out of the backfield, both carrying the ball and catching the ball. I can't believe that Green Bay actually let this guy go, considering the running back issues that they're having right now. He looks amazing, Aaron Jones does. Darnold was 17 of 28. Not a real great completion percentage number. Didn't have to throw the ball a whole lot, but had 4 touchdowns, 181 yards, had a 119 passer rating on the day. Got hurt at one point in time, minor ankle injury, came back out, I think 1 or 2 plays later. So no harm, no foul there. Aaron Jones, like I said, 19 carries, 102 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. Plus he had 5 receptions for 46 yards and a touchdown. JJ, once again, 6 for 81, 1 touchdown there. And the defense had 5 sacks. 3, which I thought was awesome, 3 from former Texans Jonathan Grenard. He got his revenge game for not being re-signed by the Houston Texans by sacking his old quarterback, C.J. Stroud, 3 times. Vikings defense had 9 tackles for loss, 8 quarterback hits in total. They were putting pressure on Stroud all day long. They got 2 interceptions out of him and really shook him up. With Houston, Stroud went 20 for 31, 215 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Like I mentioned before, David Mills came in late to relieve him once the game was pretty much over. David Akers taken over for a couple of injured backs in Houston. And boy, I think that was kind of the focal point on how they only scored 7. Akers, 9 carries, 21 yards, and 1 catch for 8 yards. Granted, that was for a TD, but they are really missing the running game right now in Houston. Diggs had 10 receptions for 94 yards. Nico had 4 for 86. Tank Dell got involved, 5 for 62. But at the end of the day, the defense for Houston just couldn't put it together. 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, 6 quarterback hits, no turnovers for the Houston Texans. That's going to be something that hurts you, especially when you're turning the ball over 2 to 3 times. Can't expect to win those kind of games. Houston was 4 of 14 on 3rd downs. So Minnesota defense, kudos to you for really shutting it down. And like I said before, that generally happened once they crossed the 50-yard line. Minnesota clamped down really well. 2 for 4 on 4th down with the Houston Texans. And like I said, there was just no run game, and they seemed like a one-dimensional offense at that point in time. Houston also had 11 penalties for 88 yards. Didn't help them at all in this game, which is why Minnesota, again, was able to run away with this one. Not something that was real predictable by anyone, but after watching the first couple of weeks, you figured it was going to be a little bit closer than that. It's not time for either one of these teams. Obviously, the Vikings are 3-0; they're way ahead of schedule. But the Texans, to be 2-1, no reason to hit the panic button at this time. Did I expect them to be 3-0? Actually, no. I thought that they were going to lose that first game at Indy and be 2-1 at this point anyway. They host Jacksonville next week. They'll probably get the easy win there, especially after seeing what happened last night, which was pretty ugly for Jacksonville. But then again, they were playing Buffalo. But we will get into that game as well. So 4th game on the docket right now is we've got the Denver Broncos at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was an interesting game as well because Tampa Bay, much like the New Orleans Saints, was putting up a lot of numbers in the first 2 weeks. Everyone kind of expected them to walk away with this one. Broncos are coming in 0-2, looked lackluster on offense. Tampa Bay coming into the game 2-0 at home. This should be a slam dunk, right? They got dunked on. That's pretty much what happened there. Broncos come in an upset game and win 26-7. And I'm not sure how you only put up 7 points if you're the Tampa Bay Bucks at this point in time, but that's why I'm here. That's what I get to tell you right now. I get to tell you how the whole thing happened. Denver came out passing quick, and I got to tell you, Bo Nix, I had a lot of hope for Bo Nix. And before watching last night's game, I was going to come on here and I was going to say, hey, Bo Nix, out of the 4 or 5 quarterbacks, I guess 5 quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round, you've got Caleb Williams, went number 1, obviously. Jaden Daniels, number 2. Drake May, who barely played Thursday night for the New England Patriots. And then you had Michael Penix and than J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, McCarthy is out for the year, but out of the three quarterbacks, I was going to say Bo Nix, after watching that Denver game, he looked the most impressive out of the three quarterbacks. He had quick throws, and I'm talking like 1,000, 2,000 out, not even three. He was getting these throws out, and maybe that's what the problem was in the first couple of weeks. But great throws from Nix. He showed real signs of growth, and it was very impressive from weeks 1 and 2 to week number 3. Mayfield, on the other side, was not so sharp. He had a pick early against Denver, and Denver took that back to the 10-yard line. So they took advantage of it and went up early 14-0 right away in the first quarter. And I got to tell you, the one impressive offensive piece for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was Bucky Irving, who really needs to take over as that number one running back in Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay offensive line at this point is still highly suspect, but at least Courtland Sutton looked good for Denver. He came back. Josh Reynolds was kind of the go-to wide receiver over the first 2 weeks for the Denver Broncos, but Courtland Sutton actually showed up. Mayfield was just not accurate on any deep throws. He was getting the dump offs. He was getting the check downs. Any deep throws, he just seemed to be off. But for Denver, Nix, 25 of 36. And this is kind of what we were used to watching him in college. That's 70% completion rating. That's what we're used to seeing from him. 216 yards. Yes, not a whole lot of yardage there, but he does complete a lot of short and mid-range passes. 0 touchdowns for Nix, 0 interceptions. Tyler Batty, not Tyler Badie, which is what the announcer kept on calling Tyler Batty. It's Badie. He used to be a running back on the Ravens at one point in time. He's bounced around quite a bit, but Batty was pretty much a baddie in this game. 9 carries, 70 yards, 7.8 yards per carry, because Javonte Williams, he lost a fumble at one point. I don't know if that's why his carries got taken away from him, but he was wildly inefficient. 5 carries for 12 yards. That's only 2.4 yards per carry. And Jaleel McLaughlin, 5 carries for 7 yards. That's 1.4 yards per carry. They were both terrible. So why not give Tyler Batty a shot? And he definitely took advantage of that opportunity. Courtland Sutton, like I said, he showed up today, 7 receptions, 68 yards, almost had a touchdown, really close when the defense for Denver had 7 sacks against Baker Mayfield. Maybe he just wasn't used to all of that pressure in the first 2 weeks, but 7 sacks from the Denver Broncos defense, 5 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits, 1 interception. Both sides of the ball played really well for Denver. Tampa Bay on the other side, or on the other hand, I should say, Mayfield went 25 of 33. That's 75% completion percentage. But like I said, it was a lot of dump passes. He only had 163 yards overall, even after completing 25 passes. Did have 1 touchdown, did have 1 interception. But like I said, the bright spot was Bucky Irving, that 9 for 70. Plus he had 3 receptions for 14 yards, 7.8 yards per carry. Great job by him. And if you compare that to Rachaad White, who had 6 carries for 17 yards, it's the same thing. These starting running backs, and I was never a big fan of Rachaad White in the first place. I've said this time and time again. He can't find holes. He can't get free. He can't juke his way out of a wet paper bag. This guy should not be the starting running back. He had the second most carries last year, right behind Christian McCaffrey, but he couldn't even cross 1,000 yards rushing on the year. This year is looking like the same thing. He's got a terrible yards per run average. Chris Godwin, 6 receptions, 53 yards, and a touchdown. Cade Otton had 7 for 47, and Mike Evans kind of disappeared. Only 2 receptions on the day, 17 yards. Ooh, where did he go? The defense for Tampa Bay was completely stagnant. No sacks against Bo Nix, who looked really quick. He got out of the pocket when he needed to. He seemed to look more downfield instead of just chucking the ball right away, but 0 sacks on him. Only 2 tackles for a loss. Only 1 quarterback hit, and no interceptions for Tampa Bay. So not a great day overall. Tampa Bay on offense, 3 for 11 on 3rd downs, 0 for 2 on 4th downs. So 3 for 13 overall, whereas Denver was 6 of 16 overall on 3rd and 4th downs. So you convert, you get it. You keep the ball, you don't turn it over, you get it. You got good running, you get it. So congratulations to the Broncos and Sean Payton getting his first win of the season, although really not a fan anyway. But Broncos 1-2, Tampa Bay 2-1. Is it time for Tampa Bay to panic? No, I think that this was just kind of an anomaly game. Maybe they didn't take the Broncos seriously. Not really sure. I had Tampa Bay at 2-1 at this point anyway. Actually had them losing against Detroit last week, but winning this game. So regardless, 2-1, they're right on pace. I wouldn't worry too much about Tampa Bay. They'll finish strong for the continuation of the first half of this season. Next game up, we've got Green Bay at Tennessee. Green Bay coming into the game 1-1. What were they going to be like going to Tennessee? Tennessee 0-2 at that point in time. What was going to happen in this one? I think everyone, if you were watching the Tennessee games over the first 2 weeks, probably could have figured that out. Malik Willis, who I will give a wholehearted, I apologize. I did not think Malik Willis was going to be able to repeat his performance from week 2 to week 3. Again, I'm still going to hold on to some of that, though, because it is Tennessee. But Malik Willis looked really awesome early, whereas Levis throws into tight windows and also, just the same kind of play from him that I'm really not a fan of. Willis is fast. He gets out of trouble. He's able to find his wide receivers. Levis had a pick 6 early in the second quarter. And, I'm just going to say their offensive line in Tennessee is complete trash. It is really, really bad. This is not all Will Levis's fault in Tennessee, but he's really got, and I hate to say this, he's got to be told not to run, even though he's being forced to. They got to find out something like Bo Nix, what we just talked about, where they're putting together some passing packages for him where he can get the ball out within 2 to 3 seconds. It's got to be quicker. The offensive line is not holding up. He's having to tuck and run too many times, and he's not fast enough. This guy is not Jaden Daniels. This guy is not Bo Nix. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not anybody fast enough to make anything happen. As much as he tries, I think he's got a great heart there. I think he's got a lot of passion to win the game. He sure shows it when he tries to take off and run, but he's just physically not fast enough to run away from anyone. He's too slow. Green Bay had a lot of yak yards again. Emmanuel Wilson was fire. He got the ball coming out of the backfield, and he's just so fast. Josh Jacobs is a threat, possibly. I think you've got a nice 1-2 punch with Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Lewis back there. And Calvin Ridley in this game disappeared. Where did he go? One catch, maybe 15 yards, 17 yards, something like that. He completely disappeared. They blanketed him, or maybe Levis wasn't seeing him, wasn't finding him, wasn't wanting to throw to him. He had Hopkins all day, though. Levis is not a great quarterback. He's not a great quarterback enough to make this work right now. And yes, he's only in his second year. Maybe there was a reason why he slid down the draft. I'm sure that there are some scouts out there that saw something, but I got to say, Will Levis is not prepared for this team at all. Green Bay, go back over to them. Malik Willis, 13 of 19, 202 yards, had 1 touchdown. He also had 6 carries for 73 yards. That guy can run. He should be able to tuck and run. If you watch that game, that's what you saw. When there was an opening, he took off and he beat people running. It's almost night and day between watching these two play on the opposite sides on Sunday. Emmanuel Lewis, like I said, 12 carries, 50 yards. He had 4.2 yards per carry. He also had 2 receptions for 35 yards and a touchdown. When he got out into the open field, he was uncatchable. Josh Jacobs, 14 carries, 43 yards. He only averaged 3.1 per carry on the other side. You had Christian Watson, 2 receptions, 67 yards. Jaden Reed had 4 for 50. So Malik Willis was able to spread that ball around quite nicely among the Green Bay wide receivers. The Packers defense had 8 sacks, 12 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for a loss, 2 interceptions, including a pick 6, and a fumble recovery. So a lot like that Giants and Cleveland Browns game where Deshaun Watson's getting hit a lot. There's a lot of quarterback hits going down on Levis. Tennessee, speaking of, 26 of 34 was Will Levis. Looks good on the stat sheet, 76%, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, but threw 2 bonehead interceptions. He's not a bad quarterback. I feel like he's just trying to make plays behind a bad offensive line, and he's trying to do too much. Somebody has got to find the identity of this team. And I hate saying that, but I feel like there's nothing there. Will Levis, you have got to have a conversation with him and tell him to not take off anymore. He's not going to be able to do it. Throw the ball away. Find somebody where you're not throwing into such tight coverage. He found like the smallest windows possible to squeak this ball into every time. So he's not even finding the best wide receivers that are open, that are out there. Pollard, what happened to him? Never even heard of Tony Pollard in this game. Only had 6 rushes for 14 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. So they couldn't get the running game going. And if that was the plan for the Packers, good call, because I would have done the same thing. Try to make Will Levis beat you. And I think he just showed that he cannot. Take Tony Pollard out of this game, and this is what's going to happen. Green Bay wins 30-14. Hopkins, like I said, he was found all day long. 6 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. 9 players caught a pass. Ridley was one. He had 1 of 9, just not enough. And that defense for Tennessee, 3 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for a loss, but 0 turnovers. I will say this, they're disciplined as far as not getting penalized. They only had 2 penalties for 15 yards in this game. So, if you're going to build something, build it off of that, I guess, where you've got a very disciplined team. Maybe you just don't have the right players in there, though. So that was that game. Green Bay, 2-1. Tennessee, 0-3. Is it time for Tennessee to panic? Obviously, yes, it is. Tennessee, I didn't have them doing much this year anyway. I have them starting off 0-3. As a realistic Titans fan, you should probably know that this was going to happen. They're at they're at Miami next week before they have their bye week in week 5. And there's not a team out there that probably needs it more than Tennessee. But I think they're going to lose that game too. Miami not looking good, especially on offense without Tua. We'll get into that one. But I think them going into Miami, it got a lot closer with them not having Tua. But I still think that they end up losing that game. Next game up that we've got here is going to be the Chicago Bears at the Indianapolis Colts. And this one, the Bears coming in 1-1, the Colts coming in at 0-2. This was a must-win game for the Colts, and it turned out to be a snooze fest right away. That's what a lot of people projected. I read somewhere they should just put this game in black and white. There's not going to be a whole lot of scoring in this game. It's going to be kind of a running game. Neither one of these quarterbacks really looks like they know how to pass, kind of like 1960s football. It was 0-0 after the first quarter. And I got to tell you, these are 2 of the worst. Everybody that was saying that this was going to be a really bad game, it really was. These are 2 of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Caleb Williams still looks like he just received the playbook yesterday. He looks so uncomfortable and unfamiliar with pretty much everything back there. And Richardson throws into triple coverage in the end zone from 5 yards out. I'm not even sure what the hell you're doing there. Try to run it, throw it away, do something else. You're 5 yards away from getting a touchdown or maybe just kicking a field goal and putting some points on the board. And it's one of the worst passes, one of the worst interceptions that you'll ever see. Go to the highlights. I'm sure that they show it in there somewhere. Just a terrible, terrible decision by Anthony Richardson. The Bears defense was leaving wide receivers open all day. They couldn't catch or contain Jonathan Taylor, and that ultimately became what the biggest factor was in the game. It was 0-7 at halftime. So if you were looking for any kind of points in this one, if you had any kind of fantasy players in here, you were probably sorely mistaken to put them in. 3-14 to start the 4th quarter. Williams started looking decent in the 4th quarter. He did have a touchdown with 8 minutes left, mainly because of Odunze, and he turned out to be kind of that shining star that Caleb Williams might be able to lean on in the future here. And the Colts just didn't want to cover Cole Kmet. I don't know if it was just a tight end thing over this weekend where so many tight ends didn't do anything over the first 2 weeks, but Cole Kmet was open all the time. The Bears ended up 9 of 12 on 3rd downs. They were 4 of 5 on 4th downs. Overall, Caleb, though, 33 of 52. He threw the ball 52 times. And the question has to be, why? Why is Caleb Williams, after the first 2 weeks, why are you allowing him to throw the ball 52 times? He had 363 yards, good for him, a lot better than the 95 yards that he had in week 1. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also lost a fumble, had a passer rating of 80.8. Roschon Johnson, 8 carries, 30 yards, 3.8 yards per carry, had 4 rushes for 32. And DeAndre Swift is like a memory now. Where did he even go? They're not utilizing him. 13 rushes, 20 yards, 1.5 yards per carry, 2 receptions for 22 yards. Odunze, like I said, was the main guy on that offense along with Cole Kmet. Odunze, 6 receptions, 112 yards and 1 touchdown. Kmet had 10 of 97 and a touchdown. DJ Moore got more involved, 8 receptions, 78 yards. The defense for the Bears only had 1 sack, 3 quarterback hits on Richardson, 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions. That was the day for the Bears. And you can kind of see why they were only able to score 16 points in this one. Richardson only threw the ball 20 times compared to the 52 times that Caleb threw it. Richardson was 10 of 20, so only completed 50% of his passes for 167 yards. He did not have any touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions, though. That's a 39 passer rating. That is one of the worst passer ratings that you can get. I think if you were in the shotgun and you took the ball and you spiked it into the ground every time that you got the ball and didn't complete a pass, I think your passer rating is still a 36, and he managed to get a 39. Jonathan Taylor was the reason why the Colts won this game. 23 rushing attempts for 110 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. He had 2 touchdowns, plus he had a reception for 25 yards. 33 total runs to 20 passes for Indianapolis. So yes, that old school 1960s running the ball. They got the memo. Chicago did not, and that's why Indy won this game. The Colts defense had 4 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, 7 tackles for a loss, 2 interceptions, and they got to Williams, and that was really the difference maker. This was just an ugly game overall. I'd like to see what the ratings were with this one and how many times that each team's fans covered their eyes because it was just so bad to watch. The Colts had 9 penalties for 78 yards. I don't know. Not sure how they got the W, except for the fact that the Bears are just not a very good team behind Caleb Williams. Speaking of quarterbacks, Bears quarterbacks, how about a former Bears quarterback? We're going to move on to the Chargers and the Pittsburgh Steelers game. And this game was a pretty good first half game if you tuned into it. The Chargers came into this game 2-0. Pittsburgh came into this game 2-0. And I think a lot of people, and they both had very good defenses. So I think it was going to come down to which offense is really going to break out. There were some questions going into the game about how durable is Herbert's ankle. How is that going to affect the team? Well, let's find out what happened. Both teams coming into this game at 2-0. The Steelers defense looked good, I got to say, all day long. Outside of a broken coverage in the first quarter that allowed Quentin Johnson to get an early touchdown, this defense really shut it down. Khalil Mack for the Chargers, he was disruptive, but there were just too many missed tackles overall by the Chargers and a lack of conversion by the Chargers to actually, keep the ball. Pittsburgh in the game early, it was 10-7 at halftime. Here's another kind of a slugfest defense. Both defenses showed a lot of promise in the first 2 weeks. The Chargers just could not get away from all of the 3rd and longs that they had, and the offense seemed to sputter toward the end. Pittsburgh defense took over. They just took advantage of it. The game was still close going into the fourth quarter. It was 10-10, so it was still a close game there, but then the Steelers attacked. At that point in time in the fourth quarter, Herbert was no longer in the game. Mentioned it before. How long was he going to be able to last in there with that bum ankle? And it only got him through 3 quarters. So Trevor Heineke comes in, and TJ Watt gets him right away. So Heineke was not the answer there. He couldn't get anything going for the Chargers at that point in time. There were miscues by the Chargers defense, and their defense was just really out there too long. They were getting tired at the end of the game. Pittsburgh wore them down, coming out with the run game. The Chargers were 3-11 on 3rd down conversions, and Pittsburgh was 7 of 14. They were actually getting it done. So like I said, Herbert, he was out early, 12 of 18, was having a pretty decent game in the first 3 quarters, 1 touchdown, no interception, had a 105 passer rating. Dobbins, is he coming back to reality? J.K. Dobbins rushed for over 125 yards in the first 2 weeks, and he didn't barely do anything. He had 15 rushes for 44 yards. plus 3 receptions for 10 yards. And if that was the goal for the Pittsburgh Steelers, to shut down that running game, because I think a lot of people have said it, Jim Harbaugh, he got the offensive tackle that he wanted in Joe Alt in the draft. He got some new running backs in there. Was not going to lean on the quarterback, which he never really does. He's more of a running guy. So if Pittsburgh was thinking, hey, we're going to shut down this running game, we're going to shut down J.K. Dobbins and make Justin Herbert beat us, well, that plan worked. That was great. Quentin Johnson, like I said, he had an early touchdown, only caught 1 pass after that. 2 receptions, 44 yards in the touchdown. Ladd McConkey had 3 for 44. That was the best receivers that they had. There's just not a whole lot going out to the receivers. They couldn't get anything going. The Chargers also had 2 fumbles, both recovered, though, so wasn't anything damaging. The defense had 2 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, 8 tackles for loss, 1 interception. Tried to keep him in the game as much as possible, but it's hard to do that when you are out on the field for the majority of the second half. Pittsburgh, Justin Fields was 25 of 32 for 245 yards, had 1 touchdown, unfortunately 1 interception, still a 96 passer rating. He was big in this game again, and I think everybody's waiting for him to implode, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Najee Harris had 18 carries for 70 yards. That's 3.9 yards per carry, plus he had 5 receptions for 16 yards. Kelvin Austin had 4 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. George Pickens had 5 receptions for 57 yards. Pat Freiermuth had 4 for 33. So Fields was finding the open wide receivers. He was getting it out quick. He was getting it out to whoever was open. The defense, like I said, the defense for Pittsburgh had a hell of a game. 5 sacks, 2 by Nick Herbig, 7 quarterback hits, 1 of which took Herbert out of the game, 7 tackles for loss. Didn't get any turnovers, though, which is very unlike that Pittsburgh defense. The Chargers came in as a one-dimensional running team, and the Steelers basically said, not today. Came in wanting to run the ball. They couldn't get it done, couldn't convert over the pass, couldn't make anything happen. So good job for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is it time to panic if you are the Chargers? I don't think so. Here's the only panic button that you might want to hit is you've got Kansas City coming up on the schedule now. And I don't know if this is some kind of a ploy. As I've said before, I think the NFL is basically a scripted WWE. So what's the best way to make sure that Kansas City can win their 4th game without the same scripted, we're going to either not call a penalty or we're going to call a penalty and we're going to give it to Kansas City? How about just taking out the wide receiver that they play the week beforehand? How bad is Herbert's ankle? There were rumors that it was plantar fasciitis, then it turned into a high ankle sprain. Do we really know what the hell is going on here? I don't think so. The Chargers, I actually had this one as a loss on their schedule. So 2-1, this is exactly where I had them. I do have them winning against Kansas City, but who knows at this point because everything looks a little bit fake. No time to push that panic button, though. I am not surprised, though, with the hot start from the Chargers and the NFL trying to slow them down so that their beloved Kansas City Chiefs can continue to win, make it to their 3rd Super Bowl and three-peat. Might as well put the mortgage on it because that is what it looks like it's going to happen. Pittsburgh Steelers are playing really good football, and they need to. They're 3-0. They look good. They haven't played real good teams. Honestly, I thought at this point they would probably be 2-1, and they've got a very tough schedule coming up here. At Indianapolis, I think that's going to be a tough one. You got Dallas. So there's a couple of good games that Steelers are really going to have to hunker down maybe a little bit more, and we'll see what they're really made of. It was funny because earlier this week, too, when we're talking about quarterbacks, did the Bears make the right decision? I don't think that they did. And this is just kind of a funny thing that popped up in my memories the other day. This is a picture of Justin Fields basically superimposed on, the guy, is it aliens? I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. I posted this a year ago. And with Justin Fields basically saying, I'm not saying it's the coaches, but it's the coaches. And I think that's what you're hearing a lot of right now, especially when you're looking at a 1-2 Chicago team that has Caleb Williams and a 3-0 Justin Fields-led Pittsburgh Steelers team. Is Eberflus on the hot seat? I would have to say yes. But really only if Eberflus was one that was pushing to not have Justin Fields. And you kind of got that impression last year where Eberflus was out there saying, hey, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's this kid. We got to get rid of him. Justin Fields is just not a very good quarterback. And if he had a lot of say in that to get rid of him, knowing that they were going to get that number 1 pick and pick up another quarterback and have it be Caleb Williams, then I think Eberflus needs to be gone if this continues to trend this way in Chicago. I don't know if he'll make it through halfway through the season if he can't turn this thing around. So I think that he is definitely one of the coaches that are on the hot seat after week 3, even if they are 1-2. The majority of Bears fans that I've talked to and that I've heard from expected a lot better things with all of the hype about Caleb Williams, and this is going to be their year, and they've got a shot at the NFC North. I'm thinking maybe not so much. You got the Vikings that are 3-0. You've got the Lions that we haven't talked about yet. The Packers are playing very well. They're 2-1. So a lot of things can happen. The Bears finish toward the bottom of that division again. I think they're looking at a new head coach for next season. Next game up is the Miami Dolphins at the Seattle Seahawks, and I think everybody kind of had an idea that this game was going to end up this way. I did anyway, especially after the loss of Tua, who, by the way, I'm still advocating they need to get him out of professional football. Somebody's got to talk to him. Doctor's got to step up. You can't leave this in the hands of the player. Obviously, the player is going to want to go, especially if he's a competitive guy like Tua, who honestly hasn't completed that much. He hasn't achieved a lot in his very short time in the NFL. Does he even have a playoff win? He's never made it to a Super Bowl, no MVPs. There was a lot of hype about Tua. Hey, man, just take your injuries and leave with your money is what I would say to him. But we're looking at the Dolphins, who came into this game at 1-1, and Seattle going to Seattle, which has their head coach at Mike Macdonald, who was the defensive coordinator of the Ravens last year. So you know that he's a defensive-minded individual. Oh, and by the way, he also has all of those weapons on the offensive side. Seattle Seahawks are a real threat to win the NFC West this year. Firmly believe that. So the Dolphins going to Seattle. Seattle's offensive line, I got to tell you, it looked solid. And Charbonnet, Kenneth Chardonnay took that game over, and he looks like a legit starting running back. He was a monster. Geno was on point early, and the Dolphins, and the Seahawks looked like they were going to run away with this one. The Dolphins looked discombobulated, which is what you can pretty much imagine from anybody who's starting a brand new quarterback that is so different from Tua with Skylar Thompson. Geno Smith had an ill-advised throw to basically save a safety. He was going to be taken down in the end zone. Fortunately for him, it only turned into a Miami field goal because Miami got it like on the 8 or 9 yard line. They weren't able to convert that and get it into the end zone. Huge miss for them. So they were only, instead of taking the safety and then giving the ball back in hindsight, hey, great play by Geno Smith there. DK Metcalf, still the wide receiver number 1. I was asked that question before the weekend even started. Do I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba is the number 1 guy? No, DK is still the number 1 guy there. Seattle missed a field goal. Miami couldn't capitalize, and that was kind of the story of the day. They couldn't capitalize. They couldn't convert on anything. Seattle didn't play necessarily clean ball either, and still made this look like a rout over the Dolphins. No third down conversions for Miami in the first half at all. This defense for Seattle basically just shut them down. Geno had a deflected interception late, not necessarily his fault as well. That's going to go against him, though. But Seattle's defense did shut down Miami at the goal line in the fourth quarter. Again, Dolphins just could not get anything going. Seattle wins this one easily, 24-3, even with all of the opportunities that Miami had to get in the end zone. Sky Thompson, 13-19, 107 passing yards. Ouch. No touchdowns, no interception. I can't wait for Tyler Huntley to start next week. That's what I think is going to happen. This was such a mundane, boring performance by Sky Thompson that they went out and they obviously they didn't have any faith in Sky Thompson because they went out and they signed Tyler Huntley, and then they went out and they signed somebody else. I can't remember who that was to their practice squad. I think Tyler Huntley comes out. You're going to see him in a Miami Dolphins uniform next week. Mark my words, bookmark it. It's going to happen. A-Chain, not the beast that we thought he was going to be after seeing him get 30 carries the week before against Buffalo, even late in the game when the game was over. A-Chain only had 11 carries for 30 yards, plus 3 receptions for 28. Tyreek Hill, 3 receptions for 40 yards. Waddle, 4 for 26. It was bad across the board. This offense could not get anything going. 3 fumbles as a team. None were lost, but still, it just kind of shows you the sloppiness of how this team is playing right now. And the Miami defense, 3 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for loss. Even despite having 2 interceptions, they could only put 3 points on the board. The defense kind of did what it was supposed to, except giving up the 24 points. but they held in check that Seattle team as much as they possibly could without having an offense. The offense for Miami was 1 of 12 on third downs, and they were 0 for 3 on fourth downs. So that kind of tells you the conversion. Like I said before, they could not get anything going. They could not convert. They couldn't do anything. The defense was out on the field. I'm actually surprised that they did not give up more than 24 points. Seattle, Geno Smith, 26 of 34. He completed 76% of his passes, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Even with those 2 interceptions, again, the score looked like a runaway. Charbonnet, 18 carries for 91 yards. That's 5.1 yards per carry on the ground. He had 2 touchdowns plus 3 receptions for 16 yards. Metcalf, like I said, 4 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. Lockett had 5 receptions for 46. And Noah Fant, again, are we seeing a trend here with the tight ends starting to show up a little bit? Maybe the quarterbacks are reminding them that they do get to catch balls every once in a while. Fant had 6 receptions for 60 yards. The defense had 6 sacks, 2 by Derek Hall, 12 quarterback hits. That's never a good sign. 7 tackles for a loss. What else do you expect from a Mike Macdonald defense? They didn't get any turnovers, though. Not that they needed them, but it always helps. So, Mike Macdonald, great job with your team so far. You are 3-0 as a head coach. And I'll bet a lot of Baltimore Ravens fans out there are saying, why in the world did we not keep this guy? Why do we still have this Harbaugh character here who hasn't done anything for us in 10 years? But let's move on from there because something might happen there. Next game that we're going to talk about is the Carolina Panthers at the Las Vegas Raiders. And if you were looking for an upset of the weekend, if you bet on this game, kudos to you. You had to know something was going to happen. Being a Baltimore Ravens fan, I remember Andy Dalton. If you are a Baltimore Ravens fan, you remember Andy Dalton. He would carve us up no matter how good we were, no matter how bad they were. Andy Dalton is a legit quarterback. And I've seen it online and people are like, oh, of course Andy Dalton's playing well. He's got like 10 more years over Bryce Young. So why wouldn't he? Well, if he's better than Bryce Young, then you put in Andy Dalton. That's how the whole thing works. I don't care if Bryce Young is the quarterback of the future, which is in question now. Are they going to be taking calls from other teams? Are they done with him like the 49ers were with Trey Lance? Could happen. And that would be what a terrible investment if that all goes south and they trade him away. All of the equity that they gave up, DJ Moore that they gave up, a first-round draft pick this year that they gave up. This would be a complete collapse. Carolina should fold up shop, move to a different state, just say that you don't know anything about football, admit it, and then move along. But Carolina, so this one, Carolina comes in 0-2. The Raiders come in with a questionable 1-1, but did beat the Ravens in Baltimore last week. The score of this game was Carolina 36, Raiders 22. What an upset for this team. And I got to say, it wasn't even that close because the Raiders got a garbage time touchdown in this one. And this one was pretty much handled by Dalton and the Panthers the whole game. Dalton is the quarterback that Carolina needs right now. They don't need to have this rebuild of a quarterback and see what happens. They need to get out of the schneid, and they did just that. First drive that Carolina had was a touchdown pass to Chuba Hubbard. Dalton looked poised. He looked sharp. He was, dropping dimes for real drop. Like he was putting this in only places where his wide receivers could pick up the ball. And I'm sure that they were all ecstatic about it. Wide receivers were, they looked great. And you didn't see this from Carolina in the first 2 weeks because they weren't getting the opportunities to do it. At the half, it was 21-7 in favor of Carolina. Las Vegas didn't play necessarily bad. They just got outplayed, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but I don't believe that they knew what Andy Dalton was going to bring to the table. They had nothing to base it off of. They couldn't see him in practice. They didn't know what he was going to do, what this offense was going to look like. With Dalton, they didn't expect what was going to happen, the connection between him and Deontay Johnson. They hadn't seen it before. It wasn't on film yet this year. The Panthers look like a team with nothing to lose also, which is also kind of a scary thing. They were just playing with reckless abandon. Like, let's go out there and let's just play the game and who cares? And when you can do that confidently, that's going to build their confidence, I think, for the next couple of weeks coming up here. Hubbard out of the backfield was huge. And the Carolina Panthers offense was really, they looked solid compared to what it was the last 2 weeks. They looked fantastic. It was a complete 180 turnaround. Las Vegas didn't really play. It didn't look like they were playing until the fourth quarter of this game. They didn't show up until then. Carolina, Dalton was 26 of 37. He completed 70% of his passes, 3 touchdowns. This is your backup? Really? That's amazing that you have this guy for your backup. It's a 123 passer rating, and you guys had this on the bench on an 0-2 team. Chuba Hubbard, 21 carries, 114 yards. The passing game opened up the running game, 5.5 yards per carry. Plus, he also had 5 receptions for 55 yards and a receiving touchdown. Deontay Johnson, 8 receptions, 122 yards and a touchdown. And the defense had 3 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, and 1 pick. So all around, overall great day for the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, you could tell that by the end score of the game. Las Vegas, on the other hand, Minshew, 18 of 28, 214 yards, a touchdown, a pick. Zamir, not great, 10 carries, 34 yards. Jacoby Myers had 7 receptions for 62 yards and 1 touchdown. Trey Tucker had 7 catches for 96 and a touchdown. The defense had 2 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, 3 tackles for a loss. And now we're going to start to question Gardner Minshew again and bring in Aiden O'Connell, which is what they did at the end of the game. Who's going to be your starting quarterback? Who would you put in after this game against Carolina? Is it that Carolina just came out big and you couldn't win? Gardner Minshew isn't a big-armed quarterback that's just going to come out and win games for you. And be honest, he's not even a Dalton at this point. Gardner Minshew is a quarterback. He's like a Doug Flutie type of a quarterback where he's not great. Will he keep you in games? Sure, he'll keep you in games, but you got to have some kind of a defense in there too. He's going to win you low-scoring games, but he's not a shootout quarterback. And I don't care if you've got Devontae Adams and you've got Brock Bowers and he's not going to do it. You have to have more of a solid run game with Gardner Minshew. Carolina showed up. They balled out. They put up points, and Las Vegas did not have an answer for him. Next game up, 49ers at the Rams. This one seemed like it was going to be a blowout, and it definitely wasn't. The Niners came in at 1-1. The Rams came in at 0-2. The Rams also came in without Cooper Kupp. They also came in without Puka Nacua, and people were thinking, who the hell is going to catch the ball now? Not to say that San Fran doesn't have their own injuries. They've got Christian McCaffrey, that's out. They had Deebo Samuel, that's out. But if you looked at the film and if you listened to me when we had our fantasy football podcast, I told you to pick up Juwan Jennings, and he had a very good day. The 49ers at the LA Rams, I'm going to call this one an upset. Not so much because, I'll back up and I'll say typically, because these guys play in the same conference. And anytime when you're talking about, I don't care how good San Fran is. San Fran could have come into this game 5-0 and LA could have came in 0-5. It's the same conference. It's the same division. When you've got these games, they always play everybody hard. It's not just Bears and Packers or Steelers and Ravens or whatever, Cowboys and Eagles. It's every division that's out there. You're always going to take it up a couple of notches and defend your home turf against a division rival. And that's exactly what the Rams did here. San Fran, their first drive, Purdy to Juwan Jennings. They looked like they were going to just rack up points all day long. To Juwan Jennings, second touchdown, Purdy to Jennings again. 14-0 early to start the second quarter. San Fran looked like they were going to run away with this one or pass away with it, having the 2 passing touchdowns. The Rams had to resort to take a fake punt to keep a drive alive in quarter 2, and it worked. And that might have been the one thing that got this team back to believing that they could actually win against the 49ers. Stafford was finding anyone that he could throw the ball to, literally. Kyren Williams catching somersault into the end zone was fantastic. That happened with 1 minute left in quarter 2 to basically, give them some kind of hope going into that second half. The Rams had a fumble recovery from Purdy at the end of quarter 2 as well. It was 14-7 at halftime. And after going up 14-0 early, the 49ers, hear it a lot, took their foot off the pedal. They shouldn't have. Purdy to Jennings again in the third quarter made it 21-7. And you got that same feeling that was going to happen in the first quarter. Okay, they went in at halftime. They reset a little bit. Great, they're going to come out and they're going to blow out the Rams. Kyren Williams had his second touchdown of the day with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Rams basically saying, hey, we are not done yet. There was a defensive stop at the LA Rams 7-yard line that also gave this team some confidence to basically say, hey, 49ers, you're not going to run away with this one. It kept San Fran to a field goal instead of another touchdown, kept it at 24-14, very manageable for a guy like Stafford, who was on point all day long. Field goal for the Rams with 7 minutes left in the game, put it at 24-17. They're one score away. A big Los Angeles Rams defensive stop forced a missed field goal by Moody, and you just felt like things were going to swing the other way. A few minutes later, you had a 50-yard pass from Stafford to Tutu Atwell, and that set up another Kyren Williams touchdown, his third for the day with 2.5 minutes to go. That made the score 24-24, and another big Los Angeles Rams defensive stop, 35-yard punt return to boot to bring it back to the 50-yard line. And Cardi, their field goal kicker, hit a 37-yard field goal to win. This one was all for the taking for San Francisco, and they basically gave it to the Rams to win. They showed some signs of flashes, and then it's like, okay, well, we're going to ease up on them. We feel bad for them. They don't have a couple of key players, and they really shouldn't have. It's a darn shame. San Fran should have won this game easily, and they didn't. Purdy was 22 of 30. He had 292 yards, 3 touchdowns, all to Juwan Jennings, plus 10 rushes for 40 yards. So he averaged 40 yards on the ground. Jordan Mason, 19 rushes for 77 yards. He also had 4 yards rushing on the ground. Juwan Jennings, like I said, I don't know if the Rams were just focused on Ayuk or if it was something that Purdy just knew that he was going to go to Jennings all the time. 11 receptions, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. If you had him on your team for fantasy football this week, you probably won. The defense for Seattle, 3 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for a loss, no turnovers, and they played kind of sloppy. They had 7 penalties for 111 yards, so they were always giving it right back to the LA Rams. On the other side, the Rams, Stafford, 16 of 25, 221 yards, 1 touchdown. Kyren Williams had 24 rushes for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. Plus, he had 2 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown. Tutu Atwell had 4 receptions, 93 yards, and the defense had 1 sack, 3 quarterback hits, 4 tackles for loss, and 1 fumble recovery. Not much in the box score for that defense, but if you watch the game, they made key plays when they needed to. The Rams did to really win this game for the Rams at home. Like I said, box score, if you're just looking at that, you're wondering, hey, how did that happen? The Rams showed up when they needed to. Great stopping of conversions. Special teams play was great. Like I said, fake punt. They got a good punt return. Special teams is key. Sometimes that'll carry you over, and it sure did. 24-27 in favor of the LA Rams. And the next game that we're going to go to is the Detroit Lions at the Arizona Cardinals. And a lot of people thought this one was going to be a shootout as well. Turns out it wasn't. It wasn't a shootout at all. The Detroit Lions come into this game 1-1 after losing to the Bucs. The Cardinals come into this game also 1-1, starting off slow in week 1 against Buffalo, but then bouncing back. Marvin Harrison had a big day last week in week 2. A lot of people thought this was going to be in the 30s again for both teams. Like clockwork, the Lions go heavy dose of Montgomery, and this has been the plan. Even when I'm talking to fantasy managers and stuff out there, should I trade Tony Pollard for David Montgomery? I said this in the show last week. David Montgomery, you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to get the ball for the first quarter and a half, and then they're going to give it off to Jahmyr Gibbs, and then he's going to get it back again. Like clockwork, this is what happened. Montgomery gets the first drive, and they go all the way down, and he gets a touchdown. The Lions defense had no answer to containing Murray, though, and that was the problem. First touchdown of the game to Marvin Harrison Jr. again, so they have built a rapport there. That was great. Goff was sharp. He had a pass to Amon-Ra. Great thing that he actually showed up for this game as well for a touchdown in the second quarter. Pass from Goff to Amon-Ra again on a hook and ladder play that he pitched back to Gibbs. Haven't seen a hook and ladder play work or even be tried, I guess, in such a long time. And this one actually worked. Pass from Goff to Amon-Ra, pitches it back to Gibbs going the other way. They get a touchdown on that play, and that was really fun to see. That made the score 20-7. Prater hit a field goal at the end of the second quarter to make it 20-10 going into halftime. And then coming back out, Kyler Murray threw a 40-yard pass into double coverage for an interception in the end zone, something that you just can't do. We've talked about that before. No interceptions in the end zones. Gotta make sure that you're getting those points and not turning the ball back over. Detroit had a lot of short passes. The runs were working really well for them, no matter who they had in the backfield, and they were playing the field position game at that point in time. Goff did throw an interception in the mid-third, but the Lions D held Arizona on a 4th down where they were going for it. Arizona actually came back and they did the same thing to Detroit in their next drive where they held them on a 4th down. So teams were trying to play for field position here. It was a close game most of the game. Murray overthrew a lot. He wasn't really precise during this game. I'm not a real big fan of Murray when it comes to throwing. Yes, can the little guy run? He sure can, and he sure looks funny when he's doing it. But he can definitely give you those extra yards on the ground, maybe not so much in the air. When you start to get more than about 20 yards away, Kyler Murray starts to lose his accuracy a little bit. They could not convert on 3rd downs either. That was a pretty bad day on offense for Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. Started a lot at their own 10-yard line, which was also kind of a big deal. Like I said, the Lions, even when they didn't score, they weren't getting into a scoring opportunity. They would punt. They would pin the Cardinals down there. They were starting within their own 10-yard line a lot. So that was very helpful. Very, very nice play managed game by the Detroit Lions. Excuse me. For the Detroit Lions, you got Goff, who had 18 of 23, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, had a passer rating of 113, which is still great. Montgomery, 23 carries for 105 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. Plus, he added 3 receptions for 17 yards. Gibbs, it's a 2-headed monster in the backfield. Gibbs had 16 rushes for 83 yards. He had 5.2 yards per carry on the ground. And then you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Just an overall great game. They controlled the clock. They controlled the game. They were 6 of 12 on 3rd downs. And the defense had 1 sack by, guess who? Aiden Hutchinson, 4 quarterback hits, 3 tackles for loss, 1 interception. And then on the other side there, you had Arizona, Kyler Murray, 21 of 34, completing 62% of his passes, 207 yards, 207 to be clear. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 5 rushes for 45 yards. James Conner, only 9 carries for 17 yards. Ouch. And 1 reception for 8 yards. Marvin Harrison Jr., 5 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. And Michael Wilson got into the game with 8 receptions, 64 yards. McBride was shut out. They basically took that weapon away from Kyler Murray, told him to go deep. He did. They picked him off. Great plan. McBride, 3 catches, 25 yards. The defense for Arizona, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for loss, 1 interception. Not a lot going on to disrupt that Detroit Lions offense. So the Lions go to 2-1. They got to keep up with the Minnesota Vikings, who are 3-0. And you've got the Cards that are now 1-2. And is it panic time for the Arizona Cardinals? I would say no. Not yet, anyway. I only had them going 6-11 this year anyway. And in their first 3 games, I had a loss at Buffalo, win at the Rams, and a loss Detroit at home. So they are right on pace for what I expected them to do. Not really a panic button. I think they're still a developing team. They're still a growing team. They've got a lot of young guys on that team outside of James Conner. But yeah, no time to hit the panic button for the Cards unless you really expected them to make the playoffs this year, in which case you are semi-delusional, because that is not going to happen, especially in that division. Going on to the next game. Here's a great game, kind of a great game. Baltimore Ravens at the Dallas Cowboys. And I got to tell you, watching this game, you kind of had the feeling of what was going to happen in this game before it even started. It's the predictable playbook of the Baltimore Ravens. They play great for 3 quarters, and then they crap the bed in the 4th quarter and either lose or potentially lose this game. Baltimore's coming into this game 0-2. Dallas is 1-1. They go into Cleveland and they win, and then they get beat at home by the New Orleans Saints. So a lot of question marks surrounding the Dallas Cowboys, and maybe even more question marks surrounding the Baltimore Ravens. Was it panic time in Baltimore, 0-2? Yeah, especially when you're supposed to be some team that's supposed to be playing in the AFC Championship game. You're supposed to be playing for a Super Bowl this year, just like you were last year. But let's go ahead and let's go through this game real quick. Baltimore does what Baltimore does best. Like I said, they played great for the first 3 quarters, and then they pissed it away in the 4th. The Ravens ran all over Dallas, and I don't think that this was going to be a surprise for anyone, because the Dallas Cowboys run defense has been pretty abysmal over the first 2 weeks. So early on, it was a heavy dose of Lamar Jackson, King Henry, and Justice Hill. All three of them got into the game. We'll go into their stats in a little bit, but they ran all over him. Dallas tried to run, had no such luck. The Baltimore Ravens do have the number one rushing defense in the NFL coming into week 3. And unfortunately, they have the 32nd best passing defense. So this was not going to work for Dallas anyway. They were going to be throwing the ball a lot, which they ended up doing. Aubrey hit a 65-yard field goal. That was probably the most exciting thing to see out of the Dallas Cowboys in the first half. He was 1 yard away from tying the NFL record of 66 held by Justin Tucker, in which case Justin Tucker, there's a problem with him. I think everybody's starting to see it now. He missed a 46 or a 45-yard field goal. There's some kind of mechanical thing going wrong with him. He's not hitting field goals, making this a routine kick from 50 yards when the guy can hit, or from 45 yards when the guy can normally hit from 55. I think we need to address the elephant in the room with him and find out what in the heck is going on. So Aubrey hits that, which is cool. That's the only production for the first quarter of the Dallas Cowboys. 14-3 Ravens at one point in time. CeeDee Lamb, they're making a rush. They're trying to make a score. He fumbles in the red zone to start the second quarter for the Dallas Cowboys. And I will say this, what terrible officiating again against the Baltimore Ravens. And I can't say this enough. If you go back and look at it, I am not being a conspiracy theorist. Go back and look at this play. The Baltimore Ravens had Dak Prescott dead to rights in the end zone. He's being taken down. Okay. He throws the ball and his offensive lineman catches it. That's intentional grounding. There was no wide receiver. There was no running back in the area. There was nothing there. Officials, they get together and you're pretty much saying, yeah, they're going to call this intentional grounding. It's a safety. Everybody is making the safety sign, right? They come back and they just say, it's an incomplete pass. He threw it to his offensive lineman. What, that's it? Like, you got to be kidding me. Kyle Van Noy comes out and he's vocal about it and says, boy, I didn't think that was a thing. Like, hey, if you're getting taken down in the end zone, just go ahead and throw it to an offensive lineman. And Lamar Jackson comes back and he says, hey, I wouldn't get that call. And he's right. He wouldn't. That was a BS call. 99 out of 100 times, that call is an intentional grounding. Apparently, unless you're wearing black and purple. Terrible call by the officials again. And I'm going to call out the NFL and the officials later on in this podcast as well. Like I said, he was in the pocket. He was in the end zone. He threw it to the offensive lineman. Terrible, terrible play, or terrible call, I should say. And I got to say, watching this game also, watching King Henry pick up speed in the open field is probably the scariest thing that a defensive back, they got to be thinking to themselves, oh, crap. Like, that is just scary. That dude is massive. And when he picks up speed, he's stiff arming people to the ground. That is just an ugly sight if you're on the defense. Lamar hit Bateman at the end of the second quarter to make it 21-3 Ravens. Aubrey hit another field goal to make it 21-6 to start the third quarter. Henry again had a big run mid-third quarter, 28-6 in favor of the Ravens. And to start the fourth quarter, that's where we were at. Tucker missed the field goal in that fourth quarter. There was a 46-yard field goal at the 11-minute mark, but it's still 28-6. But at some point in time, when that happens, it's like, oh, your kicker misses a field goal. It's like the football guys just kind of look down at that team and go, well, you missed a field goal. Now you're screwed. Now we're going to put everything against you and you're not going to win. And that's dang near what happened in this game. TD from Prescott at the 9-minute mark to make the game 28-12. They tried to go for a 2-point conversion and they failed. Baltimore muffs an onside kick that likely would have put this game away. But Zay Flowers can't hang on to it, and Dallas gets the ball again. Prescott hits Tolbert for another touchdown, 28-18 with 7 minutes to go. Terrible play calling by offensive coordinator for the Ravens, Todd Monken, to not run down this clock a little bit more. He's running, throwing a pass, incomplete pass. He's not making it any easier on this offense to get out of this game with a win. Prescott then another TD pass to Turpin with 3 minutes to go and makes it 28-25. Thank God for Lamar Jackson that he actually took control after that. I don't know if that was the play calling, but Lamar took it into his own hands. He's running for first downs. He's closing out this game by himself. It just seemed like, I don't care. I need to be there. He was vocal about it afterwards. Not a fan of the play calling. He even said he did not believe that they should have taken their gas off the pedal. They needed to score more and stay into this game. Lamar goes 12 of 15 for 182 yards, 1 passing touchdown. That is a passer rating of 139. He also had 14 carries for 87 yards, which is 6.2 yards per carry, and a touchdown on the ground. King Henry had 25 carries. Finally, he gets up to that 25 mark. 151 yards, 6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, plus he had 1 catch for 23 yards. And Justice Hill, like I said before, 5 carries, 33 yards, also had an average of 6.6 yards per carry. And as a team, the Ravens averaged 6.1 yards per carry. So if you're playing the Dallas Cowboys, get your run game ready and just run at them all day long because they can't stop the run. Bateman had 3 receptions, 28 yards, and 1 touchdown. Zayd disappeared a little bit, 3 receptions for 20. The Ravens were 4 of 9 on third downs, but overall had 274 rushing yards and 456 total yards on for the game. 13 penalties, again, against the Ravens. I think they're the most penalized team in football, and you can either say one of 2 things. Either they need to clean up their act, or the refs are biased. There was another play in that game, Madubuike. Justin Madubuike goes in for a sack. He literally falls into Dak Prescott in a very non-aggressive way, wraps him up around the waist and just falls on top of him. And they called him for roughing the passer. It's getting out of hand, and it's getting obvious at this point who you're trying to stop from winning and who you're trying to help winning. Referees, NFL, Roger Goodell, all need to be put on notice that this BS play calling can be handled in a different way. You've got cameras all over the damn place. You've got people that can watch this game. If as a person just watching the game, you can show me that feed again from that play that just happened, and it's very clear one way or the other what actually happened, why can't an official in a booth somewhere call down to the official on the ground and say, nope, that was not pass interference. Nope, that was not roughing the passer. They can do it. They choose not to. And when you understand that, then you'll understand what is happening in the NFL, looking like it's WWE. The officials are controlling these games in certain respects. Not all of them, not all the time, but they do have a hand in them, and it's getting pretty obvious. Baltimore Ravens defense, 3 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for a loss, 0 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. Dak Prescott had 28 completions of 51, 379 yards, 2 touchdowns. Rico Dowdell carried the ball the most. It looks like he might be the running back in Dallas going forward. 8 carries, 32 yards, plus 3 receptions for 24. Jake Ferguson was one of the leading receivers, 6 receptions for 95 yards. And we talked about CeeDee Lamb, 4 receptions, 67 yards. The defense for Dallas, no sacks. No sacks, only 1 quarterback hit, no tackles for a loss, no interceptions, no turnovers at all. This is the worst performance by a defense the whole weekend. Dallas has got to do something with their defense. It's not just that I would love to say, oh, Baltimore's just that good. No, they're not. You're a professional football team. You can't get any sacks, no tackles for loss, no interceptions, no turnovers. You got 1 quarterback hit. That's it. Oof. Guess who else is on the hot seat? Dallas. So Baltimore wins that game 28-25 in a close game. Is it time to hit the panic button for the Dallas Cowboys? Yeah, I would say it is for the Dallas Cowboys. At this point in time, I actually had them at 3-0. They're 1-2. I had them winning at Cleveland, which they did. They should have won at home against New Orleans, which they did not. Should have won this game probably against Baltimore, but did not. I had them at 3-0. Panic button time in Dallas, especially when you got Washington and you got Philadelphia. They're both playing well. Giants are kind of a mystery team maybe at this point. Panic button for the Ravens? No, not at all. Baltimore actually had 1-2 at this point in time. A little bit different order. I had them actually losing at Kansas City, winning against Vegas, and then losing in Dallas. They will have Buffalo at home coming up, primetime game. That is going to be a fun one considering what happened last night. So let's move on to the next game. Speaking of terrible officiating, oh, here we go. The Kansas City cheats again. I almost don't even want to recognize Kansas City at all in this game because we know what the playbook is. It's happened more than any other team. It's happened 3 times out of 3 games this year. Officials keep the game close because Kansas City is a mediocre team at best. The quarterback for Kansas City is mediocre at best. His stat line is average at best. He is not the best football player in the NFL. He's not the best quarterback in the NFL. Is he the quarterback that has the most Super Bowl rings? Yeah, sure, fine. Was he helped by the referees? Sure as hell looks like it at this point, because the playbook is exactly the same. The script is exactly the same for every game. So we've got Kansas City coming in 2-0, Atlanta 1-1. Cousins looks sharp right away. And London looks like he is an actual producer this year. Last year, he was kind of up and down, didn't have the best quarterback play coming out of Desmond Ridder, but he is one of the guys. Patrick Mahomes, overrated, threw an interception in the end zone. Yeah. What is there to say about this one that I even want to talk about? 3rd and 3, there was a flag thrown against Atlanta for a weak-ass roughing the passer call. Just in case Kansas City didn't convert, they ended up catching the pass. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we didn't need to throw that. But it was 3rd and 3, and we really needed them to convert on 3rd down. So we were going to throw that flag, even though he got tapped on the shoulder pad and then fell down. So terrible call there. This game was 14-13 at halftime in favor of KC, 22-14. I'm sorry, in favor of Atlanta, 22-14. KC, after the start of the 4th quarter with 4 minutes left to go, Atlanta was down 22-17 at the Kansas City 6-yard line, 3rd and 5. And if you saw any of this game, you already know what I'm talking about. 3rd and 5 pass was such an obvious defensive pass interference against the Kansas City Chiefs. It gets called 99 out of 100 times again. The defender wasn't looking for the ball. The defender was he wrapped up the wide receiver before the ball had even gotten there. And no flag, because it's Kansas City. Would that have changed the game? We don't know. But call the damn play how it should be called. That would have given Atlanta first down on the 1-yard line and given them 3 attempts to get into the end zone. But instead, they go for it on 4th down. They don't get it. At the end of the day, Atlanta loses this game because of more BS penalty calls in favor of Kansas City. And, might as well just change the name to the Kansas City Refs, the Kansas City Cheats. I saw a poll this morning that there were quite a few people that actually chimed in on this poll as well. Do you think that the NFL officials are in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs when they're calling these games? A whopping 91% of people that chimed into this poll said yes. This is not just 1 or 2 fan bases saying, oh, you know what? It could have went this way, could have went that way. The only fan base out there that actually believes at this point in time that they don't have the referees in their back pocket is the Kansas City Chiefs. Every other fan base sees it. The week before, Cincinnati gets called on it. It was even more egregious against Kansas City than it was against Cincinnati. Cincinnati gets called for it. Kansas City doesn't. It's getting real sad. It's getting real bad. And the only thing that I can say to people is whenever you see this stuff, just call it out. Really just call it out. I have canceled my NFL Plus subscription. I did not go with the Sunday package like I usually do. I didn't pay for that. I'm not planning on going to any NFL games. I am not using any of these companies that advertise with the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't use T-Mobile. I don't go to Hy-Vee. I'm not using any of these people. If you're going to advertise with the Chiefs, if the Chiefs are your golden boy and Mahomes is going to be the face of the NFL while you cheat and you let him get all the way to the Super Bowl again, which we all know is going to happen, he's going to win the Super Bowl because they need the three-peat. This is worse than the WWE. This is scripted fake crap at this point. And if people don't start to call it out, like some of the players that I mentioned before, it's going to continue. So do you want actual football or do you want this XFL bullcrap? So Atlanta gets screwed out of this game at home against Kansas City. I hope they bounce back. Is it time to panic for the Atlanta Falcons? No, I wouldn't say so. I actually had them beating Pittsburgh in week 1, losing to Philly, losing to KC. So 1 and 2 is where they're at. Raheem Morris has been a better coach than what I gave him credit for in the beginning of the year. Doesn't really matter, though. Chalk up whoever KC is going to play next week to a loss. Oh, we already discussed that. It was the Chargers, who now don't know if they're going to have their starting quarterback playing because, you can't have any kind of a fair game against Kansas City ever. So moving on to the next games. We had 2 games last night. I'll take that back. We had 1 game last night and 1 disgusting blowout of a game last night. The first one, is the disgusting blowout, and that is Jacksonville at Buffalo. And this game could not have been more lopsided. Jacksonville came in 0-2 and needed to make a statement going into Buffalo, much like Baltimore did going into Dallas. Buffalo 2-0. Really, they don't have to do much of anything. Jacksonville, not a good team this year at all. Buffalo looks to be, I'll say, the AFC favorite outside of the Chiefs if they call a game right. If you put up Buffalo right now against Kansas City, I'm saying the same score that happened last night, 47-10 over Jacksonville, happens in a fair refereed game. Buffalo, like I said, is my new favorite to win the AFC. If the refs don't screw them, they were getting big chunk plays early, marching down the field. It was 13-0 after the first quarter. In Buffalo's first 5 possessions, they scored touchdowns on all 5 possessions. And Josh Allen is so good, seriously good. Quick reads, accurate throws, great decision-making. Did somebody actually call him an overrated quarterback? Was he the most overrated quarterback in the league? What a joke. Compare his numbers to Patrick Mahomes' numbers. You tell me who's overrated and who's not overrated. 34-3 at halftime in favor of Buffalo. This game was over, and Buffalo's offensive line was solid. They gave Allen all the time in the world. They opened up huge holes for James Cook. And on the other side, Lawrence couldn't seem to quite connect with his receivers. Very little room, very little separation between his receivers. Kudos to the Buffalo defensive backs. They did a great job in really shutting this one down. And Lawrence was just a little bit off. For being the highest paid quarterback at one point in time, Lawrence was just off too often in order to be put into that kind of category of a top 10 quarterback. Again, kudos to the Buffalo Bills defensive backs. They were amazing. Jacksonville was able to run efficiently. But by the time that they really started, the game was over. It was over by halfway through the second quarter. It was really embarrassing, but you can't give up on the run. They ran the ball really efficiently. Jacksonville did from the start. Their pass offense was just awful. Lawrence, 21 of 38. That's only 55% completion. That might be one of the worst ones of the weekend. 178 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, a passer rating of 65. And like I said, Lawrence is looking to be very overrated at this point. ETN, 11 carries for 68 yards at 6.2 on the ground for him. Plus he had 4 receptions for 17 yards. So he was really the only bright spot for the Jacksonville offense. Christian Kirk had 8 receptions for 79 yards. Brian Thomas Jr., 5 for 48. The lone touchdown was Brenton Strange, their tight end that's filling in for Evan Engram. And if you have not picked him up, if you're playing fantasy ball, go ahead and pick him up. They should have been throwing to him a lot more. He did have 2 catches for 12 yards and a touchdown, so he was a great waiver catch at that point in time. But Jacksonville, 2 for 13 on third downs, 4 for 8 on fourth downs. They had to try something. They just weren't getting it done up front. Defensively, they had 0 sacks against Allen, only 1 quarterback hit, 3 tackles for loss, 0 turnovers. This defense is terrible, and the offensive line when they pass is also terrible. They've got a great rushing offensive line. They can really create some holes there, but they are not giving Trevor Lawrence enough time to find anything. Buffalo, on the other hand, you're looking at Josh Allen, 23 of 30, 263 yards. He came out sometime, I think, halfway through the third quarter. It was pretty much over. You can't let that guy get hurt. He had 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, a passer rating of 142.1. Wow, overrated my butt. Plus, he had 6 carries for 44 yards. That's 7.3 on the ground for him. They were 6 of 11 on third downs, 2 for 2 on fourth downs. James Cook was cooking. 11 carries, 39 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 receptions for another 48 yards. Khalil Shakir, 6 receptions, 72 yards and a touchdown. Dalton Kincaid, 3 of 41 for 1. And Ty Johnson got in the mix as well. Keon Coleman had a touchdown, 1 for 24. Yeah, it was basically like Josh Allen was Oprah out there throwing touchdown passes to four different people. You get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown. And that's kind of how it was on the defense for Buffalo as well. 5 sacks by 5 different guys. You get a sack, you get a sack. 9 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery. This game was over before it even started in the second half. Buffalo wins 47-10. Is it time to hit the panic button for Jacksonville? Oh my God, yes. You are darn right. Doug Peterson, I had said in the beginning of the year, he is one of the coaches that I believe is not going to be the Jacksonville or is not going to be the head coach for their team that they're starting with this year. I thought it might wait until the end of the year. I thought they might finish 8-9. It's looking like he's on the hot seat early. Jacksonville cannot get anything going right now. I think Doug Peterson, if you are not fired soon, you will not be welcome back next year. Jacksonville will have a different head coach. And wouldn't it be fun if Bill Belichick came back? That would be kind of fun. I wouldn't even mind if we got rid of John Harbaugh in Baltimore. If he can't do anything and he goes to Jacksonville, they can have him, see what happens there. So Jacksonville, is it time to panic? Yes, it is. I had you guys at 1-2, so not a real big difference there. I had you losing at Miami, winning with Cleveland, and then losing at Buffalo anyway. But you've got at Houston coming up. You're going to lose there, and I'm not even sure you can beat Indianapolis at home. So we'll see what happens with the next few weeks. And then you're overseas. I hope you enjoy your vacation over there. But holy cow, this is not looking like a real good team right now, Jacksonville. The other game last night was Washington at Cincinnati, and this wasn't supposed to be a game. I think the Jacksonville at Buffalo game was really supposed to be a decent game. This one, Washington at Cincinnati, this was supposed to be the Joe Burrow comeback game, and the Cincinnati shows us who they really are. And if they did show us who they really are, it's not pretty for Cincinnati. This game, the Bengals came out, and they came out hot, just like Buffalo did. First drive of the game, quick strike, Burrow to Chase, touchdown. I don't think they expected Washington to come right back, though, going for it on 4th and 2, getting that first down. It was pretty amazing. McPherson misses a field goal, so you kind of, again, writing on the wall, man. You miss a field goal, you're going to be shunned. He missed a field goal in the second quarter. And then Washington rushed down for a touchdown with Eckler. Cincinnati forgot how to tackle. And if you're playing against Washington, that's all I'm looking for. Because so far, Jaden Daniels, he hasn't shown that he can throw the ball. But he's shown that he can run. So how are you missing tackles and how are you missing run plays? I thought that was really, really poor defensive play by the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati had to settle for a field goal to make it 14-10 towards the end of the second quarter, but Washington came out with a big pass play to McLaurin. Who? Terry who? Oh, yeah, that guy, Terry McLaurin, who's supposed to be a wide receiver number 1 and didn't do anything in the first couple of weeks. They finally started to get him in the mix. And then a Jaden Daniels run made it 21-10, and the Cincinnati defense just looked unprepared. But Cincinnati, you can't put this on Burrow since he drove down again, but again had to settle for another field goal, 21-13 at halftime. And you would have thought that they would have made some corrections. It should have been 21-13 the other way around, but it wasn't. Washington started the third quarter with the ball and another touchdown, 28-13 with 3 minutes left in quarter 3. Burrow, another touchdown pass to make it 28-20. But again, Washington tacks on a field goal in the fourth, 31-10, and they just keep staying alive. They keep staying ahead. With 10 minutes left, Burrow hits Chase again. 10 minutes left to go in the game. So another touchdown for Burrow. Burrow's doing everything he can. It's 31-26. They had a failed 2-point conversion. And again, Washington, Jaden McDaniels passed to McLaurin. Touchdown in the end zone. What a great catch. He got his knee down. 38-26 with 2.5 minutes to go. Burrow led another drive for a touchdown. But by that point in time, it was too late in the game. There was only 40 seconds left. And I want to thank Cincinnati for letting Zach Moss run that ball in, because I was winning my fantasy week up until 40 seconds left in the last game of the week. And when Moss crossed that goal line, I lost. So thank you so much for driving all the way down there and really just, hitting me hard at the very end. Cincinnati D blew this one for me. It was not Burrow. I saw somebody come out this morning. Oh, Joe Burrow this, Joe Burrow that. Are you kidding me with Joe Burrow? Don't give me that crap. Burrow was 29 of 38. He completed 76% of his passes, 324 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's a 127.5 passer rating. What more do you want this guy to do? Moss had 12 carries for 58 yards. That's 4.8 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Plus, he had 5 receptions for 39. Jamar Chase had 7 for 62. He had 2 touchdowns. He had 6 for 118 and 2 touchdowns. Chase Brown had 7 carries for 62 yards. It's 8.9 on the ground, 2 receptions for 7 yards. Iosheva had 5 receptions again, 52 yards, 1 touchdown there. The defense really blew this one for Cincinnati. If you couldn't tell by the stat line in there, 2 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, 1 tackle for loss, no turnovers, couldn't stop drives. And I got to say kudos to the head coach for Washington for the play calling in that game. You could just tell that they had a plan. Dan Quinn knew what he was doing. He knew the pieces that he had. A very well-prepared game for Washington, not a very well-prepared game for the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals being 0-3 right now. And the question is it time to hit the panic button? Hell yes. Probably more so than any other team out there. They should be 2-1 at this point. They should have won against New England at home, lost to Kansas City is what we had here, and then a win at home against Washington. Now you're going to Carolina. Man, it puts that game in perspective, doesn't it? Should be a slam dunk game. Cincinnati should be able to go down there. You've got a hard schedule coming up too. Cincinnati hasn't played the Ravens yet. They haven't played the Steelers yet. They haven't played the hardest part of their schedule, which is really sad. They should be 2-1. They're 0-3. No team in the modern era has gone to the Super Bowl starting 0-3. So I think if you had the Bengals in the Super Bowl this year, you pretty much cross a line right through them. It's not going to be pretty going forward. And I will say this as a closing note, because we are at about an hour and a half here. I'm going to double down on my NFL rant here. Is that NFL is unbelievable. And I don't mean that like as in that song, Unbelievable. Oh, no, I mean, you're not believable. You are not credible at this point in time. And everybody is starting to see it. You're putting a product out there that is really weak. Your star players are hurt. Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Kupp, Nuka, Puka Nacua. You've got a lot of guys out there. You're not putting a very good product out on the field. You're just not. Nobody's buying this crap anymore. So do us all a favor. Put some more referees in there. I've got my referee shirt on right now. Put me in there. I'll make the right call. If you don't, and as an official, if you don't, I can't see another profession that can get it wrong so many times and still be able to keep their job, except for weathermen and weatherwomen that are predicting the weather on the news. They can be wrong all the time. They still get to keep their job. There needs to be fines for piss poor calls against bad officials. There needs to be suspensions for these officials, and there needs to be firings based on these officials. You've got all the cameras in the world. You've got your people in New York that are right there watching the game every time that there's a challenge flag. You can stop this. If you don't stop it, you're not credible. The NFL is losing fan base right now because of the way that the game is played right now. You've got every opportunity to make the right calls, to make these games fair. If you don't, people are going to start to catch on. And what I would tell people is don't waste your money. Don't buy NFL merchandise. Don't buy into it. It costs the average person $600 just to watch all your stupid NFL games that we can pretty much tell what's going to happen in them at this point in time. So do the right thing, make the right calls, make it football again, make it make sense. How about that? So I am Jeff D. That's it for me today. Come back tomorrow. Keep your eyes open. Follow me. Like I said, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. My fan base is growing on Facebook now. Twitter. I might start an Instagram account. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm obviously you're watching this on YouTube. So go ahead, follow me. I'm going to put this on Spotify as well. Don't miss a thing. Follow me everywhere. Sometimes I post in one area and I don't post in another. Any kind of comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, please hit me up. Otherwise, stay tuned for this week where we're going to talk some more fantasy football. And we'll probably make some predictions as to what is going to happen in week 4. Let's have some fun.